makes me.
Oh, let me find the chat. I know you guys are there. There you are. And go. Morning. You were saying?
It cracked me up that I said the thing to Alex and Danny, like, oh man, that was hilarious when it frustrated Danny, so Alex like clipped that specific part of their show out and dropped it in the thread. I was like, oh.
You know what? I haven't actually watched that yet. We could just...
No, we're on YouTube. Don't pull that up.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Now I gotta see it later.
Yeah,
off YouTube.
Yeah, he quotes. In fact, it's Dave Chappelle.
I accept.
But it's funny. It's funny, and it was in context. Yeah, man. I know this is totally unrelated, but are you tracking on the fact that Trump did a town hall on CNN last night?
Yes.
And George Takei and Jeff Tiedrick and the ilk are just, CNN, how dare you platform this monster? And I'm like...
Have you seen any of the town hall?
No, man, I was smoked. Okay,
so she makes a bunch of accusations, and among them is like, well, you know, you could have done more on January 6th. You should have. You're clearly responsible for that. You should have said something. You should have told people to act right. He goes, oh, I did. Well, yeah, but you waited until 3 hours after everything was over. No, I didn't. Here, I brought it with me, and he pulls out a stack of paper from his inside pocket, and it's the tweets. Starting with the day before saying, we are the party of law and order, respect the law and order. Make your voices heard peacefully. We don't want any violence. We don't want any this. We don't want, and like, you know, oh no, you're a liar. Oh, I brought receipts. And just completely slaughtered her on live television. It was fantastic.
That's why nobody was supposed to watch, because the truth comes out about these kind of things.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because it gives us a chance to segue. The lie got out ahead of itself with regard to January 6th, and it came out so hard. I got part of my analysis of that day incorrect, and I'll continue to say on air I got part of my analysis of that day incorrect, because it's important to understand just how easily these bastards can trick you and get you to believe things that aren't true, especially if you're like me and you're in your car and you're driving down the road and you hear something on the radio and you don't have time to pull out your magic Google machine and do some reading, which is why we're going to talk about the corruption of Clarence Thomas. Now, and go ahead.
Because of the narrative that's being spun around Clarence Thomas and the fact that you brought up how you were wrong about January 6th, I want to do just a quick throwback. I was more right about January 6th when it first happened, and we talked about this on the show. The reason I got it more right was it was an unfair tactic, and one that should be deeply unreasonable. And I said clearly on the show, and I pushed back on some of the things you said at the time by saying the first and most important thing to understand about the situation here is that the narrative that is being portrayed by the media at large is convenient for the people that hate America and want to kill your children. And you should automatically assume that everything, most especially those things which are most inflammatory, is an outright, complete, and total fabrication. And at the time I said, beginning with the idea that any police officers were harmed in any way during the activity. And almost immediately, within just a couple of days, it came out that they absolutely lied about they either said 4 or 5 police officers were murdered by Trump supporters at the Capitol. And we found out very quickly that that was an absolute lie.
Yeah, only one person was killed, and the cops killed her.
There were 2 killed. The cops killed another person there.
And Willow Bar, your wife, chimes in and says 4. But look,
I'm pretty sure that's correct, dear.
So here's the thing. Let me just give you the thesis. This is being done.
Clarence Thomas is the BAMF.
This is being done. This is being done because, and we've talked about this before, about how the judicial activism of the left, and well, them chickens are coming home to roost, baby. There's going to be a bunch of decisions that come out of the Supreme Court this summer. And as we talked about before,
and they're already starting to look like they're going to go very well.
That's right. And one of the things that's probably going to get nuked is the whole concept of the Chevron deference, which is going to take a lot of teeth out of executive orders. And I mean, it's about to be bad for them. But when you couple that with the fact that, as I said yesterday, I think it's inevitable that Donald Trump does end up getting charged here in Fulton County now. If not here in Fulton County, but here in Georgia by the Fulton County prosecutor. Since there's going to be criminal charges against Donald Trump that are going to have to work their way through the system, they're probably going to rather conveniently butt heads with his running for president schedule, if I had to guess. Some of his stuff is going to end up in front of the Supreme Court. Not only are they poisoning the well for everything that is happening right now, for everything that is going to happen over the next few months, but I think that they understand that it is inevitable that this stuff is, with Trump, is going to end up in front of the Supreme Court, and they've got to have that well poisoned. Now, the left is the one that built the court into what it is. Judges were never intended to have the amount of power that they have outside of their very specific scope of duties.
And this goes all the way back to judicial review.
Yeah, exactly.
The principle of judicial review established in Marbury versus Madison, that was like the birth of judicial activism, and what literally happened there is the court said, we're afraid to make a ruling on this case, and so instead we're going to establish a constitutional theory of interpretation that says that the court has the authority to overturn laws based on the interpretation of their constitutionality. The power of the Supreme Court to declare a law unconstitutional and to say that any law which is abhorrent to the peace and intent of the Constitution is itself null and void. That is not a power that the court had. That is a power that the court created from the enumerated penumbra of unenumerated rights and powers. But going forward, that weapon has been used to extraordinary effect by the left. Judicial activism gave you abortion on demand, and it is the root of the transgender political movement. But now we see a court where, guys, if Donald Trump did anything right, it was getting bodies on the court. And I'm not even a huge fan of is it three? He put 3 justices on the court, right?
Yeah, but look,
I'm not even a huge fan of the 3 he put on there. Except for, I like Amy Coney Barrett. I'm not a big fan of Kavanaugh. But the fact is that even me not being a fan of all 3 of them, all 3 of them have done relatively well in the position and ruled to a greater or lesser degree correctly, in stark contrast to the habits of old. And amid all that, it's important to remember that Clarence Thomas, right? The left hates Clarence Thomas for a pile of reasons, not least of which Joe Biden absolutely abhors and fears the idea of a clean, articulate Negro.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
He struggles with that deeply. And to that point, he has been engaged actively in the racist character assassination of Clarence Thomas since literally the beginning of Thomas's reign on the Supreme Court. And it's not just because Clarence Thomas is an articulate, intelligent, competent black man, which the left abhors, but he directly replaced one of the most effective, prolific, and abhorrent judicial activists in U.S. history in Thurgood Marshall.
Yeah, oh no, Thurgood Marshall was a mistake. The fact that we lionize him, Thurgood Marshall, God, I should have pulled the quote up because I had to have known this was going to come around. But Thurgood Marshall says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, look, you don't necessarily have to worry about the law. You do what's right and then allow the law to catch up. Right. And it's like, bruh, that is not how
that is the opposite of how this works.
That is the literal opposite of how the courts are supposed to work. So all this got kicked off from a ProPublica article. That was supposed to be a ProPublica article that I happened to make sure that Chris had a copy of. It's me doing my duties there, baby. But
you said duty.
That's right. I said doing too. Anyhow, and it's this super overproduced thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
No. Yeah. Right. It's this super overproduced thing to make it look like, of course, we've got Clarence Thomas looking all dour and pissy, and then Harlan Crow, the billionaire, looking all effete and snobbish. And scroll it down, see if that thing plays again. There it goes. Yes. Before you even read the article, you get this nice...
That's very nicely done.
Yeah. The extent of Crow's largesse has never been revealed. Until now. And then the first few paragraphs of the article from ProPublica talk about how a few years ago, the court ends its term. Clarence Thomas and his wife go on this thing where they fly around volcanic archipelagos, and it would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, except it did not cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars because they got to hitch a ride on Harlan Crow's private jet. And oh my God, a Supreme Court justice is compromised because he's accepting gifts from this billionaire Harlan Crow. Holy shit, what are we gonna do? Well, the first thing that I did was just do some Googling, and it turns out that this is actually not the first time that a news organization has tried to bring Clarence Thomas down by tying him to Harlan Crow. There are articles that you can easily find that go all the way back to like 2012 saying, oh my God, Clarence Thomas is friends with Harlan Crow and it's terrible and it's awful and he flies on his private jet. Wait a minute. You mean while Obama was president, this was known? Okay, then so it's obviously not a problem.
Right.
Because...
Well, and...
Justice Kagan has done the same thing. Justice Sotomayor has done the same thing. And yet none of my Democrat colleagues care because this is a political attack directed at a justice they hate.
Senator Cruz.
It really is that simple. It is absolutely that simple.
And our friends at the TPS show are bringing up the fact that Sotomayor had like a $3 million book deal.
Oh yeah.
And here's the thing: there's actually more conflict of interest in the Sotomayor $3 million book deal than there is with any of the stuff that they're bringing up with Clarence Thomas. And even the thing with Sotomayor and her book deal, I don't actually care that much about. Like, oh, you mean you gave a Supreme Court justice $1 million advance to write a book for you? You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like a wise business decision.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could get a Supreme Court justice to sign their name to something with regard to me. I'd be rich, like, for life. So one of the big things that is really being pushed here is this real estate firm. This is the smoking gun that a lot of these people bring up and say is just the end all be all. Oh my God, I can't believe Clarence Thomas is doing that. Did you know that Clarence Thomas has been claiming income from a real estate firm that's been closed for almost 20 years?
Okay. You jumped over an important point real quick. I want to get back to it real quick. And Alex and Danny just sent us the link, like you said. You mentioned that she took $3 million from the book publisher, but this is a more important piece here.
Yeah, she didn't recuse herself.
Right.
Yeah.
So Clarence Thomas's buddy doesn't have any business before the court.
Oh, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. He bought companies that have had business before the court, but he bought those companies after their business with the court was completed. And so there are people that are bringing that up in bad faith and saying, hey, well, Harlan Crow's, he owns companies that have business before the court. Yeah, but he wasn't the owner of the company when they had their business before the court. You lying shitbird. Dude, that was amazing. Can you hit me with that?
Yeah. Fucks, yeah, baby. Well,
what do Koreans call that?
Sotomayor.
Mukbang?
Well, huh?
Just making a joke. What do Koreans call that? Mukbang?
Mukbang, yeah. But you know, the publisher has had business before the court after paying her money while she's still serving. That was the point that I was getting at. Is she did not do the same thing. She did not do the exact same thing that Clarence Thomas did.
She did something worse.
She did something significantly worse.
Yeah.
And when I say significantly worse, what Thomas is accused of doing is having enjoyed trips with a friend, which would have cost him $500. What? That is the same as saying you are corrupt because you rented a hotel room for $150 one night. And that's just crooked because it should have cost you $5 million to buy that hotel. Yeah, that's why I rented a room.
Well, look.
Like, you hire us to shoot a wedding video and you don't have to spend $50,000 on cameras.
Golly, are we there? Between the two of us, have we spent that much on gear? No, I don't. Ooh, okay. Nonetheless, we could shoot a hell of a wedding. But yeah, like even the thing with Sotomayor and this book deal, like that is a big. I mean, so fucking what? Like in all, and I understand the appearance of ethics is ethics, but at the same time, like. I mean, we're talking about we're talking about things that are really not.
Dad, I like my coffee like I like my Supreme Court justices. Old, hot, black, and a little bit bitter.
Oh. Anyhow, but so fucking what? Really? And now to go back to the real estate thing. Can you pull up I want to make sure I get the names right. All right.
Yes.
Because you hear about this. Oh my God. He's reporting the income from. This is the ProPublica.
Oh, okay. We need this one.
Yeah. Okay. What
are you doing?
It's trying. Yeah, they don't want you to be able to use the thing. because they understand.
They hate professional production.
Well, they think they're the professionals, my dude, and they're trying to make guys like us look bad.
CNBC. Look at this shit. This looks like a freaking VA website.
So
fire your boomers, shitburger.
So hire
competent professionals.
So this right here, key points. These are what CNBC says are the key points, right? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas reported that his family has earned rental income from a Nebraska real estate firm that has been shuttered since 2006, according to the Washington Post. Scandalous. In recent years, Thomas reportedly continued to disclose between $50,000 and $100,000 in income from the old firm annually.
Okay, quick point. All this crooked money that he's apparently receiving from this nefarious business. This sentence right here. Thomas reportedly continued to disclose. He
reportedly reported
between $50,000 and $100,000 in income from the old firm annually. He's disclosing the earnings.
Yeah.
That's super shady.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the truth. Oh, man, I made $78,000 last year from this thing.
I used my illegal tax shelter to not shelter money from taxation.
Right. So as we get down into it, and you have to get a few, what are we, right, so you go down, you have the stuff, you have the headlines, you got the key points. And then right here, man, until the body of the article, Thomas has reported income from a firm called Ginger Limited Partnership over the last 2 decades, but in 2006, it was shut down and replaced by a new firm, the report said. The new firm, Ginger Holdings LLC, is similarly named, and there is no mention of it in Thomas's records. So the place was called Ginger. It closed. It immediately reopened under the name Ginger. And Clarence Thomas has reported income of between $50,000 and $100,000 from a place called Ginger for the past 20 years. And this is what they want you to think is this ginormous scandal. That means we need to add rules to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and let me be clear about this too. We're talking about somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. Now, $100,000 annual income is that's not a lot of money, guys. That's a reasonable middle to upper middle class income, right? For a lot of y'all watching right now, $100,000 annual income. That's okay. You're doing okay. You're not worried about the power getting cut off because you couldn't afford to pay it after you bought the groceries. But when you're talking about accusations of political corruption, because that's what this is, they're trying to accuse him of serious political corruption and some sort of nefarious wrongdoing, and they're talking about amounts in like $50,000 to $100,000. But somehow these same people can't get their heads around the idea that Hunter Biden being paid more than that per month,
right,
to sit on a board for which he was not qualified, that happened to have extraordinary counter-American political interests while Hunter's father was in office as the vice president. Oh no, there's nothing to see here. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, right. We could totally charge George Santos with like 15 counts of fraud, but we can't figure out whether or not we need to charge Hunter Biden. Yeah. So let me just back all the way up though, because I want to make sure that's why I want to touch on this. That's why I want to touch on this before we go, because there's more details. Like, was supposedly it's terrible that Harlan Crow paid for a kid to go to private school. You know, like there's right. A lot of stuff there where they're trying to make Clarence Thomas look as bad as possible. But here's the thing. It doesn't surprise me that Clarence Thomas has millionaire friends, and it doesn't surprise me that his friends want to do nice things for him. simply because they want to enjoy his company. Some years ago, Chris, Steve, and I were all heavy into playing Hearthstone. It is an electronic card game released by Blizzard. And there was this big expansion from Hearthstone that came out. Chris wanted to continue to play with Steve and I at an appropriately competitive level. So Chris just purchased the expansion for Steve and I. Didn't ask us, just fucking gave it to us and said, all I want is for you guys to keep playing with me and I'll give you the damn expansion. And so we continued to play the video game together for a period of time because Chris gave us the expansion. And that is exactly what happened here, only at absolute top-end scales. I'm going to make a statement, and I'm going to need it to be understood that Ketanji Brown is the exception to this fucking rule. You don't get on the Supreme...
There are brilliant people on the Supreme Court.
There you go!
Well, okay.
Look, even with, like...
Sotomayor's on the Supreme Court, too.
No, look...
And so Sotomayor is an even more stark example than Ketanji Brown, that you don't even have to be a decent person. You can be a naked racist. But as long as you have the correct opinions, they'll stick you on the Supreme Court.
Look, but where I'm going with it is you have to have a certain amount of qualification and accomplishment, and even if it is...
That's for you, Alex.
Yeah, that distracted me. Even if it is things that you or I wouldn't consider to be positive qualifications, there are.
That one's for you, dear.
There are qualifications. You do have to have a certain amount of accomplishment. And I would argue that even Elena Kagan and Sotomayor are at least accomplished in such a way as to be comparable to the rest of the court. So is it really surprising that somebody like Clarence Thomas, who, since the passing of Scalia, is probably the most brilliant conservative legal mind in the entire judicial system at present, is it really shocking that he would be friends with billionaires?
Yeah.
I mean, not at all. Not even a little bit. And you reach a point where when you're at the top end of whatever you're doing, you could kind of only hang out with other people that are at the top end of whatever they're doing, because you just don't have Jesus. That is all my fault. That is all my fault. You just don't have things in common with other people before. And that is not to say that, I don't want to hang out with a common folk anymore, or that I think Clarence Thomas is some arrogant shitbird or anything like that. But just like Sotomayor got millions in a book deal, well, it makes sense. She's a Supreme Court justice. And Clarence Thomas hanging out with, yes, a conservative billionaire. I mean, no kidding. You mean rich and powerful conservative people make friends with other powerful conservative people? Gosh, it's almost like that's completely fucking normal.
It's almost like rich Democrats going to the French Laundry.
So anyhow, all of that is just touching on it. There's a lot to dig into if you want to go down the rabbit hole here, but almost every single one of these instances where Clarence Thomas is corrupt for this or for that, when you follow it up and you look it up and you actually understand the details behind it, and you're like, this is not a big deal. Like, just to be clear, the Supreme Court knows about all of these activities.
Yep.
And they're all fine with it. Do you think that the rest of the court would allow Clarence Thomas to pull down their clout and their power and their prestige? You don't think that they would throw him right the fuck under the bus if they thought that it was going to somehow make the court be less powerful than it is? Meanwhile, there's an actual corrupt thing that happened fairly recently on the court that we still don't have an answer for. How did we get that draft opinion leaked of Roe v. Wade? How did that happen?
Yeah, and there's an obvious and simple answer there. The only way that happened is one of the justices or one of the justices' immediate direct aides.
Probably the justice that's not qualified.
Probably the justice that's not qualified.
Just a thought. Nothing ever got leaked before she joined the court.
Funny story.
That's weird. Man, that's weird. Man, we've never had a theft at this restaurant ever until we hired that new manager.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we've been robbed 3 times now.
We've never had a situation where the Supreme Court directly incited violence conducted by American domestic terrorists like BLM, the DNC, and Planned Parenthood until one of them couldn't tell the difference between a man and a woman.
Yeah, but they want you to believe that Jenny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, she's the one that wants to foment violence and incite insurrection and all this other bullshit. It's just, yeah, it is what it is. So be on the lookout for it. The amount of hatred that's going to come down for Clarence Thomas, this is all to poison the well. This is to poison the well now to create a wedge issue. This is to poison the well for the immediate future, so that the left can claim that all of these Supreme Court decisions are invalid. And this is their ace in the hole for if Donald Trump ends up in front of the Supreme Court. That is what all this is. The left is many things, most of them negative, but they're patient. They are willing to play the long game.
Well,
and that's what this is. This is a long con.
There's one more piece to this long con. They honestly think that they can win the presidency in 2024. And clarify something for you.
Well, they honestly think they can be. Yeah, they honestly think they could be declared the winner.
They can, exactly. They can win it the same way they won 2020. And the part of the hope here is that Clarence chooses to retire. Failing Clarence being bullied into retirement by these psychopaths, they will have him murdered away. I say that advisedly based on recent analytics of events. They sent an assassin to attempt to assassinate Kavanaugh, and just recently, a couple of dozen Democrat senators and House representatives signed on to attempt to shut down funding to Supreme Court security. They're attempting to create a soft target so that they can have him murdered in case he doesn't choose to retire, because he is the conservative justice most likely to leave the court soonest.
Yeah, he's in his mid-70s.
And they want him gone. Without their direct, exactly, Dad, without the direct intervention of their violence and psychopathy, Thomas could easily continue to ride that bench for another 20 years.
Yeah, it was
and
okay.
They cannot have that.
Yeah, it was okay for Ruth Bader Ginsburg to do it, even though I think in retrospect we're allowed to say she was clearly fucking dying and incapable of doing the job.
Yeah, and we know that for the last at least 2 or 3 years, she wasn't even doing her job. She was having her opinions written by staff while she was in the hospital.
Yeah, and Alex points out that this is a Pandora's box situation as well. You know, we've said before, it's amazing that Donald Trump has gone through everything that he has gone through and so little has stuck to him, because most of us simply could not survive the kind of full court press scrutiny.
Right. And I just dropped the link in the chat. This is the Ted Cruz video that I showed you a clip from earlier, and he goes into pretty substantial detail and shows that each and every one of the other left-leaning judges on the court, at least, have done not just the same thing that Clarence is accused of doing, but actually done the corrupt parts of the things that are being fabricated within the context of those accusations. But I really do have to put a pin in it there and get moving. So, you got anything else you want to close up?
Now just buckle up, baby.
It's going to be a ride. Y'all be safe out there, and we will see you tomorrow.